Oh, it's been far too long since we've had a conversation, my friends. Shamrock Energy. Don't even know what the episode number is. The last time I did one of these videos, it was after the Stanford game, if I'm not mistaken. So we're talking back in like October, right? Middle of October. And at that time, things were starting to click for this team, right? Like things were starting to come together. And this is where I started to put it out there. Like, this is a team that can play with anybody. This is a team that has a capability of not only fighting for a victory, but winning. And it doesn't matter the competition, especially this year. In my opinion, going into this season, it was more or less an even playing field, more even than it had been historically. And this was going to prove itself to be a Notre Dame team that was much better than the ones that we've seen in the past. Just more configured to win in the biggest moments. I think the third video that I did, maybe it was the third, maybe it was the second, but it was one of the first ones that I did. And it was in the offseason leading up to Notre Dame playing Texas A&M. I think it was a month out. And it was Notre Dame in the big moments. Can they rise to those moments? Because our golden standard as fans that were born after 1995, like my generation of fans, it's that 1993 team. And what do we always think about with that 1993 team? Obviously, we think about the Boston College loss, which was crazy, right? But we think about that Florida State game and what that meant for this program. Let's figure this out. Backwards hat. And so at the time, you have to continue to look back to when was the last great Notre Dame team? And it was 1993. You could argue that they should have at least shared a title with Florida State that year. And it was the last time that Notre Dame got a major bowl win, and it was in the Sugar Bowl against Florida, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, that was the call to action with this team. You got Marcus Freeman coming in his third year. You've got one of the most top-end talented teams that Notre Dame has had since then, but without a doubt, it's the deepest team that Notre Dame has had in 30 years, at least, right? At least 30 years. And boy, was that on display this season. Now, before I dive into this, guys, I want to tell you why I haven't been doing a whole lot of these videos since the Stanford game. And the reason is this. I am doing stuff with First and Gold podcast with my boy Peter J. Mulroy. I've been focusing a lot of effort on that. Not to mention, work has been crazy. I actually have some downtime right now. It's a really slow time of the year. Everybody's out of office, it feels. So I've been really kind of putting more effort on First and Gold podcast as they are an affiliate of Irish Tribune. And Irish Tribune is doing some amazing things, guys. Anybody that watches this video, there's two things I want you to do, please. Before you like or subscribe anything on this channel, I want you to follow First and Gold Podcast on Twitter, X. I want you to follow Irish Tribune if you don't already. They are doing things differently. It's just, I don't think anybody else is really doing content the way that Irish Tribune is. And the best is yet to come with that. We're going to do some pretty crazy things in the offseason to grow First and Gold. I might even try to do some stuff to actually grow this channel as well. We're evaluating what to do with that. But the person that runs Irish Tribune, Luciano Antonini, is phenomenal. He's a great dude. And it is blown up. I mean, we've got 100,000 followers aggregated across all different channels of social media. But we really, really want to grow the First and Gold podcast, and we're going to evaluate what to do with it, but we are going to do more with video. So look forward to that. That's going to be a big deal here in the off season, and I'm very much looking forward to it. So with all that being said, I'm going to go on Do Not Disturb so that way we're not getting any notifications here. All right. With that being said, let's dive into this because this is uncharted territory, really, for most Notre Dame fans. I mean, if you're my age and you're 29, like you have not experienced a feeling like this. You have never watched a game like that. It just hasn't happened. You know, you just simply have not been blessed with the privilege or granted the privilege to have this feeling. So take it in, soak it in, because it is an unbelievable feeling. It feels even better the morning after than it did while the game was going on and while it shortly ended. I mean, you're just in shock because you just haven't had that. We've seen Notre Dame on that stage before, and it's been an embarrassment. For lack of a better term, it has been an embarrassment. There are so many stories baked into this team. And there are so many of those stories that ended up revealing themselves in the biggest moment that Notre Dame has had in that 30-year span, certainly of the season. Some high-level observations for you. This was a game that was won in the transfer portal. Bo Collins, Riley Leonard, obviously, Jaden Harrison, R.J. Oben, Mitch Jeter. Like, these are 5 pieces right here that won you the game. So this all started in the offseason. And this is very important to remember because this is something that we were talking about going into the season. If you follow Shamrock Energy, I'm not the only one that was saying it, but you know that this was kind of a leading indicator of, hey, we have something here. This is the window. Right here, this is the beginning of that window for Notre Dame to make that push. Didn't expect it to go down the way that it did, though. Because aside from Riley Leonard, the transfer portal was just more or less complementary pieces for this team. No one was kicking it to Jaden Harrison this season because he has a history of taking him back to the house. Kirby Smart had his Bo Schembechler moment where no one kicked it to Rocket. He kicked it to Rocket, and Rocket took it back twice, if I'm not mistaken, against Michigan. Well, Kirby Smart just had that moment. And I got to tell you, the thing that's crazy about this is that the momentum was on Notre Dame's side at this point already. And it started, one, with 6 points scored by Mitch Jeter, who had every reason, you're going to hear this a lot today, had every reason to just mail it in. I'm injured. My body of work speaks for itself. I'm going to the NFL. And that injury it really handicapped what Mitch Jeter was able to do for much of this season. You had a guy that was battling through what seems to be a severe groin injury at this point, groin, hip flexor, whatever. It's essential for kicking. And they try to bring him back, and it's not working, and you can imagine what happens next. He's starting to get the yips, and you are thinking in the back of your head, if Notre Dame actually makes this push, because it started to become real around October. It really did. Like, you could tell that this team was on one, and they were playing up to that level. You thought in the back of your head, if this comes down to field goals, we are screwed, and eventually it's going to get to that point. Well, Mitch Jeter put together yesterday one of the best performances I've seen individually from a kicker, if not the best. All kicks were north of 40 yards. In fact, he's made his last 5 of 6, and if I'm not mistaken, all of them have been north of 40 yards. That right there says a lot about this dude's mental toughness, his will to get back. And we had heard it all year long. He's close to 100%. And then this week we said, Mark Tripp said, yep, he's ready. He's good to go. And we saw the result. He was invaluable yesterday. And then you get this, and okay, momentum's on our side. It's 6-3. We weathered the storm early on. Before we dive into this amazing sequence, they weather the storm early on. This is critical because Georgia was all over Notre Dame, even though it didn't show up on the scoreboard completely. Follow me here. You get a situation where Georgia takes the early lead, right? You're like, oh, God. Notre Dame fights back, right? And then Gunnar Stockton hits a bomb to Arian Smith, who I've been calling all year. That is their best receiver. Top to bottom, he's their best receiver. And I felt like Georgia's receivers were really, really good to begin with. Just playmakers all around. Him, Dylan Bell, Dominic Lovett, and then that tight end room. And they all made appearances. But that was the biggest play that Georgia had on offense, and you're sitting there and you're like, this is a concern. And they got bailed out by that sideline penalty, and you're like, okay, there's a handful of things happening. One, Georgia's winning the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. The lack of beef that Notre Dame had against Georgia's offensive line was evident early on. Even with Howard Cross, there were reps that he absolutely got. There were reps that Josh Burnham got. I didn't see Donovan Heinisch getting pushed too far down the field, but I would have to go back and watch the film. But it was standing out. Gabe Rubio was playing well, although he did have some losses early on from a rep perspective. Zen time, baby. Let's go. We're doubling up. And so you're thinking, ooh, been here before. You know, this is getting kind of scary. Well, Notre Dame weathered that. And every team that I have watched before 2024 and 2025 now, they have folded in those moments. That right there is when Notre Dame says, let's try to keep this close. Let's try not to get embarrassed on a national stage. And this team would have none of that. Marcus Freeman would have none of that. Mike Denbrock, Al Golden, no. They stayed calm. They said, and honestly, Freeman said it in the presser. Who knows if it's fully true, but he was like, yeah, it was just a missed check. Like, we didn't get the call in time, and that stuff happens. We're fine. We'll settle in. And that's exactly what they did. They come back. They get 3. They stop them. They get another 3. And then Georgia doing what I honestly think they should have done. I don't blame Kirby Smart for this logic whatsoever, because you could tell Georgia was smelling blood. There was blood in the water, and they wanted to hit. They wanted to strike. They wanted to get rid of any doubt that this was going to be their game. So how do you do that? You be aggressive. You don't go into a game like this. You don't go into a game like this with a tentative mindset. That was something that we have learned while being a part of the Brian Kelly era. You can't come into these types of games and just hope to hold it together. You got to be there to win. It sounds simple. It's easier said than done. And you'll understand why as we continue to get through this. So Kirby Smart's like, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to take shots. We're going to tie this thing up. Or we're going to be able to go over the top and get ourselves a touchdown, because Christian Gray looked vulnerable at that time. Locked it down the rest of the day. Shout out to him. Real quick, this is the thing that pisses me off more than anything, is these overreactions when Christian Gray gets burned. It's going to happen. Against a team like that, and the teams moving forward, that's going to happen. Whether it's Leonard Moore, who got beat by Dylan Bell on that back shoulder, it was a great play, or if it's Christian Gray getting beat over the top, these teams are going to make plays. I had someone actually text me, he's having a Dante Vaughn type season. Are you kidding me? It's not even close. What are you talking about? And this is the thing that makes Christian Gray different, and it's what makes this team different. They bounce back from that. Don't worry, I got you. No need to freaking make it's all good. And he did that. Well, then the unthinkable happens. First of all, Junior Tuihalamaka is having a great game. Had, in my opinion, the best game that he's played ever. Really established himself as a weapon against those tackles, which were vulnerable at Georgia. But then the unthinkable happens. First play, Gunnar Stockton goes back to pass, and who else but R.J. Oben makes the play. Swats the ball down, fumble, ball on the ground. They get the ball back at the 11, and Ryan Leonard hits a strike. They come in with a 2 tight end set. It's 21 personnel. You think run, maybe just get a field goal. Nope. This staff, this team, they wanted 6. And as a fan, you're like, we need 6 here. This would be huge. Dart to Bo Collins. That's the thing. I mean, right there, you just scored 10 points in 25 seconds. But that's not all. Because after that, and after you basically got Georgia to flinch, you didn't flinch, Georgia did. What does Lou Holtz what did he always say? Don't flinch. Never flinch. It's so true. This was the key. If you listen to First and Goal podcast, this was a key a major key to this game. Notre Dame can't flinch. We've seen it so many times where they did, and it was over. They didn't. Then they got Georgia to flinch. Then, inexplicably, coming out of the first half and into the second, they kick it to Jaden Harrison. And somehow, some way, he wills himself to the end zone. 17 points in 54 seconds. The best sequence I've ever seen at Notre Dame. At least in my lifetime, and I don't know if there's been a better sequence than that. Period, end of story. Special. When you're watching Jaden Harrison break those first series of tackles, he makes that cut and he's gone. And you're like, it's 20-3. However, that's just the beginning of the story. Because we all knew, if you're paying attention to college football, and you've been watching Georgia film like a psychopath like I am, and I know anybody watching this channel, you're sick in the head. You know that Georgia loves to play from behind this year. It's really been their mantra, the never say die attitude. They were down 17 to Georgia Tech. They were down more than that. I don't know, particularly against Alabama. And they battled back in both. They win in 8 overtimes against Georgia Tech. And you're like, this game is far from over. And Georgia Tech proved that. Drake Bowen allows Cash Jones. He releases him. He spills out. He did the wrong thing. It's something that's fixable. Boom, 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 score. And you're like, yeah, it's going to be a game. It's 20-10 now. And it was just a battle. It was just a battle to get to the end. And I cannot be alone in this. In fact, if I am, I'd be shocked. You're thinking the entire time, oh, just wait. Georgia's in this game. Georgia's going to find a way to battle back. And they held on. The message that was sent from Marcus Freeman and the staff was awesome. It was so refreshing and different. And it's not just comparing him to Brian Kelly, it's comparing Marcus Freeman to the Marcus Freeman of old as soon as this year. Remember how pissed off we were in that pregame interview that Marcus Freeman had with Miami of Ohio? Like, well, we'll take what they give us. And it was like, what are you talking about? This tentative spirit, like, that's not what we signed up for. What we learned today, and really throughout the season, but specifically today, is that guy learns quickly. And it proved what I had said when Brian Kelly left and why I was advocating for Marcus Freeman. It wasn't this whole players coach thing. I don't care. Whatever wins games, give it to me. It was, if you've got the chops, you've got the chops. Marcus Freeman fully proved this entire season he's got the chops. And what does that mean? It means you learn quickly. Kirby Smart's a great example of this too. He was a bad in-game coach. Coached himself out of some big ones. Truly. Got aggressive when he shouldn't have been, and when he got aggressive, it was ill-executed, and you just didn't have that type of belief. He learned, right? And Kirby Smart, in my opinion, is one of the best in-game, well, he is the best in-game coach in the country until today. Now it's Marcus Freeman, the same guy that struggled to get 11 guys on the field against Ohio State, the same guy that freaking dropped the ball against Northern Illinois, and the same guy that came in with a real tentative game plan against Miami of Ohio, outcoached Kirby Smart. And that has to do not just with him, it's a testament to the entire staff. And so they go for it on 4th down, and they fail. They don't get it. It was a bad play. Obviously, you knew it was going to be quarterback counter or quarterback power. It's what they've done all year. And Georgia was ready for it, and the offensive line had a really bad rep across the board. It wasn't even close. Riley Leonard fought to make it look close. It wasn't. And now Georgia, the ball is in their court, and the back is against the wall. They end up having to go for it on 4th down. They bring pressure. They didn't wait for things to come to them. They went to exactly who you thought they were going to, either Love it or Bell, and they were well short. And he gets the ball back. And before you know it, some back and forth, they're deep in their own territory, and they throw it to Aeneas Williams, and Aeneas Williams reminds me so much of Kyron, and just the way that he battles for yards. He makes it to where it's decision time, but not a real decision. You know that they're going to punt it, right? They bring the punt unit on. This right here was the Freeman effect. And it was time that Kirby Smart got caught with his pants down. They substitute the entire punt unit. The offense comes on the field. Georgia was ready for it. They go out and sub two. You don't think they're going to snap the ball. It's not going to happen. They wanted to get Kirby Smart to burn a timeout. And Kirby Smart knew that. He read the bluff and didn't waste a timeout. One way or another, if he burns a timeout, that's a huge victory. But then, with 1 second to go, maybe two, hard count, Georgia jumps, free play, first down. Notre Dame's offensive line and Notre Dame's offense, who had struggled all day. It was an ugly performance. The offensive line ties it all together, and they do what they did against A&M. They battled. They weathered the storm, and then by the fourth quarter in that last drive, they start leaning on this elite defensive line of Georgia. Frankly, the front seven is elite at Georgia. That's a different unit right there, man. Jalen Walker is a special player, and a unit that had been abused all day long. They start leaning, and you're thinking, it's 20-10, right? And you're thinking, I just don't. Let's get six. I mean, let's do it. And they're driving for it. And that throw to Faison was on the money, and it was a dumb chicken shit, just bullshit call on that illegal shift. It shouldn't have been called. It was a mistake. That officiating crew was bad for both sides. I think we could all agree on that. Georgia and Notre Dame fans alike. Like, that officiating crew sucked. Just bad. That was such a bad call. You have to settle for a field goal in a drive where 6 was ripe for the taking, and then we would be having an even different conversation. Like, it would have been 27-10 at that point, and totally out of reach. But Mitch Jeter was money. He knocks it in, and then Notre Dame holds as they just drive deep into the field. It's that pass interference that I could argue isn't pass interference. Just not at the. I felt like not the time to make that call if you're the ref, but at the same time, it's not like Jack Kaiser's turning around, playing the ball. I get it. I understand it. I was furious when it happened, but in hindsight, I can understand it. They hold the line, and Notre Dame goes on yet another drive, and before you know it, this game's over. And, just some ancillary items. Jordan Faison's the best receiver that this team has. It's very obvious. He's going to continue to get folded into this game plan. He does remind me a little bit of Golden Tate, just in the way that once he catches the ball, that's where the story begins. He eats up yards. He did not have a drop yesterday. He's ascending, and we have not. The best is yet to come with him. Make no mistake. The best is yet to come with him. And you do everything you can. Riley Leonard hurdles over a defender, gets absolutely tabletopped, lands on his head. And this is something that we talked about going into this season, and this is why this is so important. Riley Leonard accounted for about 170 total yards of offense. He was the most successful rusher of the day, and it was an ugly performance. You look at the stat line across the board, and you would say Notre Dame got dominated. But the thing is that when you got a guy like Riley Leonard, it's a huge difference maker, because Riley Leonard, there's a couple things about him. One, he's fearless. He'll put his body on the line, especially when it matters most. Two, he's a playmaker. And I'll tell you why that first point is so freaking poetic and important. And this is not meant to drag Sam Hartman, but it is something that I mentioned in the offseason. And it's something that I mentioned leading up to this, as this season progressed. When it mattered most, Hartman, besides the Duke game, wasn't able to pick up that extra yard to get the first down against Ohio State. Twice, he struggled to do it. There would be no discussion like that with Riley Leonard. Riley Leonard was going to do whatever it took to get the first down. He outruns Georgia's defense. He leaps over a defender. He puts his body completely on the line. And usually you're not a fan of seeing your quarterback do that. But with Riley Leonard, it's just who he is. It's what makes Riley Leonard the perfect quarterback for this team. And it's like, you've got so many stories like this where it's like, Riley Leonard would have had every excuse to crumble under the pressure. And there were a lot of people. And this was the video that I made after the NIU game, which was crazy to say the least. It was absolutely psychotic, but I was speaking some truth in there. You're not benching Riley Leonard. That's not happening. So just stop. And it proved out to be completely true. This team would not be this team without Riley Leonard at quarterback. And you got to put some respect on his name. The dude has dog in him. And it was so amazing to see him get some shine for that. Even though it was like the most Riley Leonard performance ever. Even though the receiver core is not really doing much outside of Faison, outside of the one catch with Bo Collins. That was a touchdown. At the end of the day, it was like the receiver room was invisible. Mitch Evans outside of 3 plays was invisible. You would think that they would have done more to get this quarterback in a rhythm, get the tight ends involved. That didn't happen, and that was disappointing. But at the end of the day, what are you supposed to do against a defensive front like that? Your options are so limited, and we knew what this team's weaknesses were going into this game. We saw it all season. The receiver room is average at best. They're better than the last 2 years for sure because they made the plays when it was asked to be made. But clearly it's an average group, and it's a weakness of this team. And even though Riley Leonard had 2 seconds max to get the ball out in this game, even though the protection was just not what it needed to be, although the offensive line battled, Riley Leonard found a way to make it happen. Made it happen, man. And this team would not be what it is without him. So tons of kudos with him. There's more kudos to go around. I mean, first of all, Al Washington earned himself a major pay raise this season, and it hasn't stopped. I mean, you're without Jordan Botelho, Boubacar Traore, you're without a 100% Howard Cross all season long, and sometimes you don't even have them. You lose Riley Mills in the first playoff game against IU, and you're wondering what is going to be the straw that breaks this camel's back? And Al Washington has made zero excuses. The minute that freaking Howard Cross was down, Donovan Heinisch steps in, he starts making plays. RJ Oben making plays. The fact that you could keep Junior Tuihalamaka, and this is a testament to him too, to keep Junior Tuihalamaka engaged, for him to stay dialed in, even though he had 0 snaps going into week 3, is just unbelievable. And it really speaks to the character of these kids, and it speaks to the development and character of Al Washington, someone who we have called out constantly and consistently. Joe Rudolph. Again, I mean, you're telling me that this offensive line didn't take its hits. Ashton Craig out. Billy Schrouth out for a lot of this year. Charles Jagasaw out. You have to start a true freshman at left tackle. Nobody planned that. And honestly, nobody planned on Pat Coogan playing the instrumental role that he has. From a leadership perspective, yes, you would expect that, but for him to stay dialed in, for Rocco Spindler to stay dialed in, for them to have gotten abused the way that they did throughout that game, and for them to battle back on those last 2 drives, it says everything about this offensive line. It says everything about the DNA of this team and this coaching staff, of the players that were not happy that they weren't playing a more instrumental role in this team early on. They stayed bought in, they stayed dialed in, and when given the opportunity, they battled in. I mean, both Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan, those are 2 dudes that have been subjected to rightful criticism for the way that they've played throughout their career. There were times where it felt like Rocco Spindler was just one day away from transferring, and he never did. He stayed bought in. For him to have played the instrumental role that he has is just unbelievable. And it's just a team that battles. They never stop. Even against a team like Georgia, that you knew that the comeback was always on the table. And even though you know that in the trenches, especially at the guard positions, especially along the front 7 of Georgia, that's where they make their money. and it didn't matter. They held on anyways, and it's what makes this team so easy to root for and so easy to be proud of. Because you couldn't point to any one thing in that game where you're like, that's why Notre Dame is better than Georgia. You just didn't. You could see that there was not a talent gap necessarily, but at certain positions, yes, they were strong where Notre Dame was weak. It didn't matter. It did not matter. There was a never say die attitude. There was resolve across the team, all the way down to the scout team. And it is what has allowed Notre Dame to put forth the most Notre Dame season ever. It's vintage Notre Dame. And now you're in a position where it's not just my uncles, it's not just my grandpas, it's not just my dad and people that have watched those teams in the peak Lou Holtz years talk about how great those teams were. Now I get to say that about this team because this team is great. This team completely turned the corner. This program turned the corner yesterday, and it feels so good because it's well earned. This feeling is well earned. This program has taken its lumps. It has been on that stage many a times over the last decade plus, and they piss down their leg every time. And there was an opportunity. There were multiple opportunities to do that yesterday, and they didn't. They refused to. And so, you could point to the offensive woes. I'll figure out what to do with this hat. You can point to the offensive woes. You can point to the fact that, to be honest with you, your best players were completely neutralized in this game. Completely neutralized. And if you would have told me, like, that Jeremiah Love would have had, 18 yards and Shadarian Price would have had 30 and, Ryan Leonard only accounted for 170 yards total offense, it would have been like, yeah, that's going to be a tough day. And it was a tough day. This team took its lumps for sure, but they battled through it. They played their C- game on offense, and they still found a way to make it happen because it's all three phases. Marty Biaggi going through the stuff that he went through that I had no idea until yesterday. I mean, he had a kid. His wife was hospitalized. His dad died. And there's more where that came from. And yet his unit put forth 17 points. Wait, excuse me. His unit accounted for 17 points. Or 16. One way or another. I mean, even though they made mistakes, even though they got flagged, even though the number one rule with special teams is what? Do no harm. They did harm a couple times, but they made up for it. You have a coach that completely believes in this team. You had a coach that came out there that was there to win, not just to, let's hold on and preserve this lead. No, it's killer instinct. They have it now. They've been missing it forever. They've been missing it for 3 decades, and now they have it. And again, it just makes you so proud. I mean, in my grandpa's house, and they cleared out most of the basement. In my grandpa's house, there's some Notre Dame memorabilia that's still there. I think my uncle's going to take this picture. It's a picture I think about way more than I should, and it's in the national championship game against West Virginia. And it's Frank Stamms standing up like this. It's Wes Pritchett with the number 1 sign, and it's Michael Stonebreaker, I think, getting out from the tackle. Out from underneath the pile. It's this beautiful oil painting, and I think about it a lot. And I look at this team, and they have the opportunity to recreate that moment, man. I mean, just to be able to do what they did was unbelievable. It cannot be understated. And now you're in a position as Notre Dame fans, and you're in a position as a program where you're like, the best is yet to come with this team. The best is yet to come with this program. I mean, I know that this year's the focus. It for sure is. But, it's hard not to think about next year, too. I got to tell you something. I think that the roster's in an even better position next year than it is this year, pending transfers and whatnot. And you look at that game, and you look at the way that they played and the courage and just the way that they battled. If you're a recruit, why wouldn't you come to Notre Dame? I said this last night, and I'm taking it back. I don't think that Georgia's dynasty was ended last night. It's just going to be in hibernation for a minute because Kirby Smart's going to find a way to get that team back to that stage, and they're going to have better teams than the one that they have now. But you better believe that Notre Dame's at that same table now. Finally, It turned the corner. And now I don't know what's going to happen for the rest of this season. I'm going to be completely honest with you that I think that the injuries are adding up in a way that may be too much to overcome. I'd be hard-pressed to ever doubt this team at this point, but let's be real. Penn State has 2 extra days to prepare for this. They have 2 extra days to recover, and at this point, recovery's at a premium, and Notre Dame's not going to have that. You're going to have a Jeremiah Love that's at 75 to 80% at best. You're going to, in my opinion, you're going to have to dip into the bag, and you're going to have to tap Kedron Young in. I firmly believe that, and I'm totally okay with it. I would have liked to have seen more from him. Howard Cross, who knows? Who knows what the injury, what that's going to be, but he hasn't been 100% all year. It'd be great to have him out there, but I don't know. You're still in a position in the secondary where you can't afford another injury because you're so thin there. You just, the depth has been completely depleted. And yeah, you still have, I don't think that the offensive line's at 100% either. And that's coming from a perspective of, obviously, the guys that you would usually consider your starters, they haven't been playing for most of the season. And you're looking at, I think Billy Schrouth is battling something. I think that entire unit is just beat up. When you play a game like that and you're going into Penn State, these are some things that are just hopping on the back of my mind. Can they actually do this? Well, the answer to that will come over the next 18 days. No doubt. But I think that it would be fair to say we might have taken our too many lumps here at this point in the season. And it might be close to that time. That said, we've been asking for this matchup against Penn State all year long. We know that Penn State could get got. We know that Penn State has been fraudulent for much of this year, and we also know that James Franklin is a horrible in-game coach. And now Marcus Freeman has proven that he is not. He will get you. And so, while I think that Penn State is very talented, while I think that the matchup definitely has its things, it's going to be a freaking amazing game. It's an amazing opportunity, and if you get through that, you got 11 days to figure out what you're going to do until the national championship against either Texas or Ohio State. It's an unbelievable spot to be in because Notre Dame earned their way there. And people were kind of tripping about the draw. Some people were tripping about the draw of Georgia. And you're kind of just like, well, it had to be that way. Like, it had to. This is how you silence that narrative. And mind you, the SEC narrative is completely dead this year. It's dead. Kirk Herbstreit has not been on Twitter over the last 36 hours, just so you know. It's like Paul Feinbaum had to freaking eat crow, and he did. Shout out to him for doing that. Because that narrative is done. And it was annoying when it was happening, and it was bullshit when it was happening. It's good to see that get put to bed because Notre Dame, they're the SEC champions now. Join a conference. $14 million all to themselves. Join a conference. Okay. And this is something that I had mentioned on the First and Gold Twitter. I had mentioned this, it was after the Stanford game, I believe. And it was while Georgia was playing Texas. I might be a little bit off here, but I know Georgia was playing Texas. And everybody was pissing down their leg about Georgia. Georgia this, Georgia that. Georgia bullshit. Bullshit. No. Because I started to see things that showed me that this team could play and beat anybody. And that just got proven. So while this channel doesn't have a very big following at all, and while First and Gold podcast is growing, but still doesn't have as big of a following as I think that it should and could have and will have, I will say that there were a lot of things that we were spot on about. And that was one of them. This team was engineered in such a way that it could play with anybody across the country. And while the depth has been tested, while there has been a lot of ups and downs on the way here, and while the offense doesn't look like how you want it to look, it doesn't matter. They find a way. And this reminds me of the documentary for the last national championship team that Notre Dame had. And it's called They Wanted to Win. And it's so obvious that that's the same spirit that lives through this team. And it's why this team will go down in the history books. We will tell our kids about this. We will tell our grandkids about this. We will talk about it until we die, eventually. And it will live on. And now they have an opportunity to actually do something extremely special, and that's win a title. And you couldn't ask for a better position right now than what Notre Dame is in. You knew that if you could get through Georgia, you were going to pay a price. We knew that. That was always on the table. But you knew that if you could do it, you had Penn State waiting for you, or Boise State, but you figured it was going to be Penn State. And that's a matchup I like a lot. You know, I mean, who's going to be on Tyler Warren? I have a feeling it's going to be Xavier Watts. I like that. I don't think that's a mismatch. You know, you are finding answers and creative ways to get pressure on quarterbacks. You could do the same thing to Drew Aller. You know, and this isn't going to be a blowout. I don't think it is. But I also think that Notre Dame, if they're able to do their thing, if Notre Dame is somewhat healthy in this game, and you could just get that 1 to 2 plays, maybe 3, from Jadarian Price, Jeremiah Love, you are going to be in a position where you, again, are beating a team by double digits. That could happen in this game. I could see it. I really do. I think that this Penn State team is vulnerable. So I don't know about Abdul Carter's injury. I'm going to have a funny feeling that he's going to be playing in this game. It's one of those games that you have to. The offensive line's going to have its hands full again. But you know what, man? At this point, you never doubt this team at your own peril. Seriously. And while I do have things in the back of my head that are like, maybe it's too much, at the end of the day, you just got through Georgia. You got through the best program in college football. They are the gold standard of college football right now. And you just got through them. You got through them in a way that, to be honest with you, I don't think anybody really expected. You beat them by 13 points, could have beat them by 17. You played a C- game on offense, and that's kind of being generous. You know, you were getting abused in the trenches. They were making plays. There were moments in that game where it could have gotten really, really ugly, and Penn State does not strike that type of fear in me at all, and I don't think it does with this team either. You obviously respect them. They got here for a reason. They're a good team, and they've shown moments where they absolutely could, you know, they could compete with the best of them, no doubt about it. But, yeah, I mean, like, that's where things are at. It's all in front of this Notre Dame team, and it is very exciting to be a part of. First to Goal podcast. I want you to go there. Shamrock Energy, happy to be able to do this. I felt like it was appropriate to do this, and so we've got plenty more where this came from, but what an exciting time, and what a good feeling this is. We've earned every bit of this. All that talk about this program for so long, we just had to take it on the chin because they were right. They're not right anymore. And the best is yet to come for this program, make no mistake. With this program turning the corner, there is no going back now. There is no more Champ Sports Bowl. There is no Camping World Bowl. There is no more can Notre Dame play with the best in college football. We now know that. And that is a really good feeling. And this is a team with some flaws. And we know what those flaws are. We've seen it all season long, and it didn't matter. There's too much spirit in this team. There's too much locker room leadership. There's too much resolve. And things are just coming together for this team in such a way that you start thinking maybe this is going to be the year that they do it. We'll see. Go Irish.